Welcome to Next In. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Joona, VP of Engineering at Layer.ai. Where are you coming from today, Joona?
Calling from San Francisco, sunny California.
So, where have you been over the last month? I know that we've been playing a little bit of tag where you've been all over the place enjoying conferences and everything else. Where have you been over the last month?
Mostly in California, but I think I was in Miami last week for an offsite, just visiting the team, enjoying sun on the East Coast, I guess, and just meeting up with the team. It was really fun.
Awesome. What was your favorite part of your offsite?
Favorite part of the offsite? Let me think. I was just seeing the people, but it was really like the amenities we had at the building were really cool. We had like a pool table, ping pong, a volleyball net, and everything. So that was really fun. And then in general, it's usually the people that makes a good trip. So that was fun.
Fair. And I'm assuming that you're like a pool shark, and everybody made bets with you and lost. That's
yes. I do play quite a bit of pool, but I think we mostly played ping pong this time around, which is also one of my specialties, I guess.
Okay, so you like a master ping pong player?
Not ping pong, but I used to play like college tennis back in college on the East Coast. So like I've done like racket sports and stuff quite a bit. So whether it's paddle or squash or pickleball or tennis, it doesn't really matter. Like I think any racket sports or anything with like where you're hitting a ball with a stick or a racket, like it's just relatively easy.
I think anything that says pickleball and it doesn't matter is how picket fences get started. And like, that's how people are going to get rallied up. There's such a cult around pickleball right now where Those are fighting words, man. Those are fighting words. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to, talk with us today. Our goal, man, is to truly get to know you, understand your story, understand where you came from. So I personally would just like to start with like the beginning. Like, how did you get to where you were? Obviously, you've been very successful in your career as a VP of engineering at an amazing startup. And so I would love to just understand how you got into technology in the first place.
I'll go very early stages, I guess. So this is going to be back into before I decided to like pursue like computer science. My family like historically comes from like medicine and like this bunch of doctors, nurses, and so forth. But whatever reason, like back in like high school days, I was really interested into tennis, and I wanted to get a scholarship and play tennis. And then studying for a medical school felt like a burden back in the day. So I decided to use the grades that I had from high school to basically get immediately admitted to the college back home in my hometown. So I went to a computer science degree, jumped from there into studying business on the East Coast at Christopher Newport University. So I was playing tennis and studying quite a lot. Even back there, like I've always been kind of motivated by the need to like show myself and show my strengths. And I don't know, like back in the college, there were some people that like made fun of me because I had an accent, and they said like I was kind of stupid. So I was like, well, I need to graduate valedictorian now just because of like I need to show these people that I'm not stupid. So that's what I made a goal for myself, and then that's what I did. And then went from Virginia back to my hometown, finished up my master's while I was working full time, did my thesis and stuff. And then, but that's what generally like, that's why I'm into computer science. I always like solving problems. And like the early stages, I thought I was going to be a product manager because I didn't consider myself that much of a technical person, even though I was studying computer science. But during my studies, I worked as a data entry clerk. The world's largest like type 1 diabetes research that's been going on for like almost plus 20 years. And there I kind of got really like annoyed by the fact that all of the kind of the study files were written on like these pieces of paper. And then me as a data entry person would have to like read these papers and like enter these into like SPSS and so forth. And there was so much data loss. And it felt so redundant where like somebody's writing this stuff down on a paper and then I'm then writing it from a paper back to like some kind of database, right? So it felt very archaic. So I made a proposal back to the main researcher in the clinical research to just write some type of software that allows us to like enter the stuff in. And I was able to hire my friend to join me on that conquest as well. But yeah, that's kind of like the initial touch point of how I entered into doing some software. And initial estimations and stuff I gave to the researcher like were completely off. We had zero clue what we were doing, like absolutely no clue whatsoever. like if any of the people that I work with today would know what kind of technical choices we made, they would call me out and like burn me in some kind of fire. But in any case, we were able to solve the problem, and I guess what I learned from that is like, hey, like if I have a problem, it doesn't matter how big or ambiguous it is. I can always find a way to solve it, and that gave me kind of the self-confidence to kind of continue the journey.
I actually think that's just an interesting topic in general, which is like you built a service. That service happened to use a set of technology, and if you had exposed what technologies you use to solve that problem, people would make fun of you. But at the end of the day, what I always find to be like the biggest catch-22 is the fact that you found a pain point, you built a solution, and that solution started generating money, and you started doing something wrong with it, correct? And I think a lot of startups fail to go, how do we just build to make sure that we find product market fit? And then you can raise money and then re-architect or refactor or whatever you need to do to build that system to scale. But I think so many people overlook that the technology choices at the end of the day are just a toolkit, and you get to choose how you use that toolkit. And it's like, as long as it's servicing something at the beginning, that's a pretty big win in my book. So when I look at what you did, regardless of technology choices, is that's a scaling function that becomes a much bigger challenge that is awesome to solve. But so many people don't even get to that point.
No, 100%. And I think that's like the that was the benefit of kind of doing like a mini startup within the company that you were working on that had no other technical people. There were downsides to that thing too, which is like my boss is a doctor, and then she doesn't understand the value or the difficulty of doing engineering. So for her, this is sometimes the most important things that we could help her out with is like just need to stick a USB stick in, like help her out, like get a power presentation going on or something like that. It's like, okay, great. We're IT support. Yes, we have master's degree in computer science. And then like the software was like, yeah, that's whatever. It's like, okay, cool.
That's so funny. You're like the practical stuff that she gets to put on a presentation and show off. They're like, that's what I'm excited about because it adds immediate value to me.
Yes. Yeah.
But for you, you're just doing some voodoo magic where she's like, I guess it works somehow. I don't know what
Yeah.
It's
more so like when your boss is not an engineer, basically, they can't necessarily appropriately appreciate the effort and craft that goes into some of that work, but that's okay. But going back to your point about the start, like I think the main thing that was helped me was kind of being able to work directly with users, iterating, trying to really understand the pain points that they were having, and then solving for those. And I think that allowed me to take that same mentality into going to like larger corporations later down the line as well. To basically like have that mindset of ownership and accountability and understanding like how is this thing that I'm writing actually is going to solve a user problem, which has been really helpful. Like later in my career, because I think like especially in Silicon Valley area, you have like engineers that go directly into a large corporation. They will work on some internal tooling. They will never necessarily even see the users that they're working with, and they're just like crunching tickets basically. Like, well, I fix this ticket, fix that ticket. But you don't understand the problem and what the value of solving that problem end to end actually means. And sometimes people end up writing solutions for problems that could be very solved in non-technical means as well. So,
yeah, I always think it's a catch-22 when it's like when you're solving tangible problems for the end consumer versus you're like, I got this really cool, fun technical challenge that nobody cares about, and it's never going to see the light of day. But it was like awesome that you did it, I guess, like sort of.
100%.
And I'm assuming that was, at the University of Oulu. How do you say?
Yes, the University of Oulu. That was the first like engineering gig that I had, and from there, I think I went to London for a year. So I almost joined this company called Bbox, where I would have done like user research and design for a solar panel company selling electricity in Uganda. So I would have gone to Uganda and research, do like customer interviews there. I didn't join that company. Instead, I joined Ocado, which is a large like e-commerce, grocery/e-commerce kind of company based in London. So there's a lot of those cars roaming around, and that was really fun for a year. And then I was working there as a front-end engineer, and then I got poached by Unity a year in. And funny interview stories, like initially I was kind of in between. Like I was like kind of liking London, being more international, and I had a great life there. But then Unity sent me this like box with swag, and it came with like a note of "We know where you live." So I like humor, so I was like, oh, this is kind of like a personal touch. So I decided to take up on the offer, and then went to Helsinki to work on Unity's like ad network. I joined as a kind of a front end lead for the team, so I was basically writing the a platform for advertisers where they kind of configure their campaigns, how much money they want to pay for everything. And that was the first thing where it's like a lot of money was going through the system. Is like 20 million a month or something like back then. And obviously it scaled up way since then. So just the ability for people to configure their ads and stuff was making so much money. So it felt very meaningful and impactful, even though it was still a dashboard. And then during that time, I traveled quite a bit to San Francisco to help people kind of adopt new technology here. Like I think back then it was like AngularJS, and then I was teaching people how to use React. So I made a lot of connections here, and then at some point, maybe I got a little like I'm a very ambitious guy, and I don't think the Finnish working mindset, as not as nice work-life of a balance it doesn't really work for me, because I think if anything, I felt like the fact that I was working hard was almost seen as a con, because I was making the other people feel like they would have to also work as hard. So I was kind of, in some ways, a black sheep in the team, whereas like I was like rattling the boat a bit kind of thing. So I think coming to California was like the best choice for me anyway, because like that's just my personality.
So like the culture shift from going from Helsinki to San Francisco, you're like, I feel at home now, versus, and I know like for, overseas and in Europe and Eastern Europe, like a lot of that culture is very relaxed, very much so like a slower pace. Or I guess, would you feel that's different? That's what I've heard from like Finland, Poland, Sweden. Like it's very much like a work-life balance focused, or like culture.
It is
yin yang.
It's definitely way more work-life focused, but I think like there's differences too. I mean, there's benefits to the Finnish engineering culture, and maybe like Scandinavian culture in general. There's a lot of emphasis on quality and craftsmanship, which I appreciate. So like, if I want to hire good engineers and I need quality and reliability, like I will hire Finnish engineers, because I know that they will take great pride in what they're trying to do. But if I need to move fast and like need to prototype something for a quick customer problem, that's not the type that I would hire immediately for that kind of problem. Just because people don't want to take shortcuts that often. They want to make sure that they get things done well. They want to take their time understanding the problem and so forth. Like whereas like San Francisco is way more scrappy, I guess. I would imagine like if I looked at some statistics on like average tenure between a Finnish company and a US based company, there's big differences there too. So, but yeah, I mean, I felt at home here, and then at Unity. So I joined Unity back in 2016 or something, or 17, and I think I worked there for like 6.5 years. And I started as almost like a line level engineer, and then in 6 years I got promoted like 5 times into like senior principal engineer, like first one within the company. So that was really cool. And I guess it was I could go into the details in terms of why it had happened in a second, but like but I think that was a really like nice growth story within the company for sure. And we went through an IPO, so that was nice.
Yeah, it's like everybody's dream is to get through that IPO stage, right? Yeah. And so now you're VP of Engineering at Layer.ai. So I would love to understand a little bit of like, why did that? And I do want to go back to your story and understand like that promotional growth and how did that happen? And we're going to definitely get into that in a second. But what made you make that leap of faith to go from Unity, large organization, principal engineer over a massive scope project, to joining a startup and a super small team? And like, how did that transition happen, and what ultimately inspired that? Because I know that there's a lot of people that are going to be listening that are like, I'm too at Meta or Amazon or Google or Epic Games. And it's like, I really want to join this startup, but like, I'm not sure, like, how do I cross on the other side? Right.
Yeah. I mean, there were obviously like I had been at Unity for a while. So I think a lot of the problems that I was solving were no longer customer problems, but there were more like political problems. And then political problems tend to take a lot more time to resolve, because it's the art of influencing people, building relationships, and you can't just build relationships like that. You can't influence people like this, so it takes a while. So it's pretty slow. Also, the feedback loop in terms of like when you are able to get something done successful is very slow. So it's not like an engineering, like you write some code, run some code, you get an output and say, "Yay, it succeeded." Or in a startup where like you wanna do a feature, just go and make the feature and see what the customers like about it. Like if you want to do a bigger feature at Unity, for example, it's like first it's like convincing your staff in, like it's not you shouldn't be the one doing it. Like I need to work through. I have a staff engineer that I need to convince another senior engineer to write a presentation on this problem. And then the staff engineer will give feedback, and I will give feedback on the final product. And then I will take that deck and then present it and say, like, look at this, all this amazing work that these people did. We should definitely do this, when the idea originally originated from me, but I had to get the other people behind it. And then I need to sponsor those people to actually do the work. But then that feedback, and then obviously there's quarterly planning, so you can't necessarily get the work done in the quarter that you would like. So it takes a while to get stuff done. So it's slow. But at the same time, it felt rewarding where you were able to get that stuff done. And it's like, oh, geez, like finally I was able to get this thing done. But that was one of the factors, that it was just very slow. And most of the problems
Step one is like you wanted to get a little bit out of the politic game, and you wanted to get back into like the engineering game, where it's like I want to be able to ship features more, ship solutions more, solve problems that are technical in nature, maybe not, but in a faster, robust manner versus the political game that you were playing.
Yes, I think that's definitely the case. Then also, like in a larger corporation, there's a bigger separation between like design, product, marketing, engineering, and like I want to, like, even in engineering, I want to call myself more as a universalist, but I don't want to call myself a front-end engineer, full stack engineer, back-end engineer. I just want to call myself a problem solver, if you want to call it that. Whereas like the technical skill sets that I have are just some of the tools in my toolkit. But if I need to, in order to solve for the problem, I need to think about, write a product requirements document, or measure some data and do business intelligence, or do some marketing, or talk to some customers and do salesy stuff, then I'll do that. But like I want to do kind of the end to end of product development, and even aspects of sales if required. And then I'm hoping that eventually, like I'll end up in some type of general manager type of role, so that's one of the like future career aspirations why I wanted to join Layer. And so going from the everything going slower in a larger corporation, I think another interesting thing that I was interested in is AI, because obviously, like, you know, there's a lot of hype around it, but I don't think it's hype. Blockchain was more of hype and fluff, but I think AI is there to stay, and it's going to be very meaningful for us as a society. So I need to get more expertise in that field and understand specifically what are the different tools, methodologies, how can we best leverage AI in a company. And it's not just understanding the buttons and knobs, but like the high level, what is out there and what can be leveraged. That's more important for like actual customer problem solving. And then the second factor was like I used to work as an IC, even though it was high level IC, like looking over like even organizations the size of like 400 engineers at some point. I think I wanted to get like management experience specifically, because it's hard to jump from an architect technical IC role into general management. It's much easier to be in management and then, oh, let me just manage some of these designers and product managers and let me think of the whole in the entire thing. Much more natural. But at the same time, what I did like about the IC path was that like it doesn't come with any inherent authority in the role. So the only impact that you're able to drive through other people has to come through influence, which was like really, really cool. But yeah, and also startups are like a new thing for me as well. So it's an interesting thing to try out as well. So those were the main reasons.
I was waiting for you to say somebody told you that you couldn't do it, kind of like the whole valediction thing.
I had that so many times in my past where it's like I
don't know who it was, but somebody poked you and was just like, yeah, you couldn't ever do a startup, and you're in San Francisco and you're like, test me, watch me, I'm getting it done.
I know that's the mentality about most things in life. Like tennis was one where like I told people like I wanted to go play college tennis, and there's like, no, there's no way you can do that. I'm like, watch me. Same thing with the school, at work. So many times people saying things like, oh, I bet you can't deliver this by this date. And then it's me. I don't know. I'm like burning candle from both ends and bleeding on the battlegrounds and saying like, I finally did it, kind of thing. It's like, I'll make it happen. But at the same time, maybe like these days I've learned to kind of not to get kind of antagonized or challenged into doing something that will ultimately hurt me.
Yeah, and so this is where I'm gonna say, like, Layer AI is clearly gonna be like a small get to nowhere company that's never gonna do any good. And then this is where you go, and we just IPO'd again. Let's go.
Yeah.
We just got acquired, and it's all gonna be because I told you that you couldn't do it.
Yeah, no, I think we're gonna make it. So far, we're the biggest player in gaming, and I think we've, I don't know, done very well with the revenue, and then hopefully we'll raise Series A soon, and then I get to hire a bunch of engineers, and then we can build a bigger and stronger team.
It's going to be exciting to watch you guys grow. So I want to go back and kind of step into, like, how did you get promoted? So you know, you said 5 promotions over the course of 6 years, and that's ridiculous. And in a lot of ways, you know, there are people that'll never become a principal engineer.
6 promotions actually.
6 promotions in 6 years. Every single year you got promoted.
Yep.
And man, I know, like, a lot of people, like a senior level role at Unity kind of becomes this plateau role where that could be a lifetime role where you never get higher than that. You can retire in that thing. So I'd love to understand, how did you have that growth, that velocity? And what are the things that you did? Like, if somebody were to, like, go, I want to stand in your shoes, I really want to be able to repeat what you did. What did you do? How did you do it? Help me understand that.
A multitude of factors. You need to build a reputation, first and foremost, of being somebody who's reliable and can deliver fast. That's step number one, and that doesn't help you all the way through, because that will help you from like the team level engineering into being like a technical lead within a team. Like, you're the superstar of this team, and great, you're amazing, and other people might know about you. That being really good helps you get there. But to get beyond a team level into, like, which would be like a senior engineer, to become like a staff engineer, at that point it's less so about the quality of your work. That's important, but it's more about the thought leadership. So how are you able to influence other teams around you and other people around you? Do you have supporters and followers outside of your team that don't even necessarily work with you? Do they look up for you for advice? And the only way that you can actually get those people to look up to you is by setting up one-on-ones and building relationships and actually being authentically interested in what those other people have to do. So they come and seek you for advice and pull you into meetings. And then over time, when you get pulled into meetings, other people start getting that idea of like, oh, this person is a subject matter of X, right? And so that's one thing. The second thing that I think is very important is when you make the leap from senior engineer to staff and above is, I mean, there's different type of archetypes for even staff engineers, but at least for me, what worked was being very interested in the customer problem that we're trying to solve, and not necessarily waiting for anybody to define what the problem is and how it should be solved, but just seeing and identifying the problem autonomously, and then coming up with a solution for it, getting the funding for it. So, oh, there's the question.
Oh, I'm saving that for a second.
Okay, so that sounds good. But I think like so one thing for me is like having that very strong product ownership mindset. So when I was this is my story specifically. So when I was mentoring these people in San Francisco and helping them out, kind of like learning React and this type of stuff, obviously I was building connections, but at the same time I got exposure to the different products within Unity. And what I realized, along with the product manager that I was working with back then, is that, hey, like, we have an analytics organization that is building their own kind of product for analytics for game developers. There's another organization building like this cloud build tool, cloud diagnostics tool. There's another team building some AI tooling. There's another team building this remote config dashboard that allows you to kind of remotely configure some things in a game. And I'm building this ad network dashboard. And there's another team building this dashboard for like, if you're trying to monetize your game for like the supply side, like for publishers. So we have like all of these different teams building the different tools. But then I'm like, in my head, I'm going like, it's still the same user going to all of these different tools, and they're trying to just manage their game. Why do we need like, why do we need to build 10 tools to manage these different aspects of a game? It's like, ultimately, like, I'm just trying to manage my game the same way I'm managing like infrastructure on GCP or AWS or any one of these infrastructure providers. Like, why, like, if in GCP I would have to go to 10 different products and tools to manage that would be a terrible experience. So we made a pitch to kind of the executive leadership back then, like the general manager and SVP of engineering, that like, hey, give us some funding, we'll put all of these tools together into a single kind of platform, that initially launched as Unity gaming services. And that's once we released that, I got promoted to principal engineer by being able to put those things together, into then getting rebranded as Unity Cloud, that had more than just the gaming aspect. We pulled in like asset management and artistry workflows as well into a single kind of product suite. So that was kind of what I was mainly responsible for, like getting the Unity Cloud thing done.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you talk about like, hey, like I have this single threaded product, and then it actually like I have this vertical that has much more of a horizontal flair to it, and it's like if you can get horizontally integrated rather than just vertically integrated, that allows you to expand your exposure across your product line, understanding your user more holistically, and then really caring about user experience and kind of going out of your way to do that. And one of the questions I wanted to ask, because this is something that I hear all the time when I speak to people around, like, where do you want to see your path growing? Like, where do you want to go in life? Like, I'll ask people, like, what do you think it takes to get promoted? And a common answer I get from senior level devs that I believe end up hitting this plateau mode is I'll say something like, what do you think you need to do to get promoted? And they'll say something similar to, well, I shouldn't have to get involved in politics. I shouldn't have to like speak to anyone on the team. Like the code should be able to speak for itself. And I should be able to get noticed by my contributions to my feature engineering team or my feature or my aspect or like the thing that I'm responsible for. That's what should get noticed above all else. What is your opinion when you hear a senior dev say something like that?
I mean, you'll hit a plateau.
That's how I feel, man. It's like every time I'm like, it's just like it's ridiculous to think that it's like at the end of the day, I look at it the same way as my team. Like obviously, I manage recruiters or account managers, and every single time it's like I expect you to be a good recruiter or I expect you to be a good account manager. That's an expectation. So you writing code and delivering and shipping a product that meets high standards, that's an expectation. That's not going above and beyond to get promoted.
No,
That's just meeting the bare minimum threshold, which is performing and pursuing excellence. Like that is very good in an individual job, but that's not how you're getting promoted.
No. Well, you can get promoted up to like senior engineer, and because that's just you can do your craft well. That's what it means, right? But like doing your craft well doesn't mean that you can help other people do their craft well, or that you can help the company to do a better job. So I think for me, as an example, like I think it was like, so we started with like a team of 4 engineers and a managers to start on this like spike of what this new platform could look like. And then fast forwarding, there's a lot of challenges there along the way. I'm not going to focus on this in this answer, but like taking that 4-person team into what then grew up to be like at biggest, it was like a 400-person organization around that thing that we started, right? So it's like, and then it got split into like, a platform team, and there's these different product groups and what's up. But like that small team turned into a large product group. So it's like, okay, if you're there to conceive something like that, a large thing that changes the company's vision and direction, yeah, you're like basically having influence at a very, very large scale at that point. And obviously, like the question that somebody would ask, like, well, like I'm not in a position to make that decision. I'm not in a position to make that. Like you can, unfortunately, you can spend the evening or a weekend or some time at work creating a spike, creating a cool PowerPoint presentation. You can do it just yourself. You need to know the right people. That's also an important thing. You need to have the right connections, right? If people don't know you, they're not going to give you the space and time to pitch your story. And then you want to make sure that you have the right people there to pitch with you. It's like, if I just go as an engineer, we should do this with product. It's like, where's your product manager? Where's your designer? It's like, if you get the product manager and designer in the same room and they say, we should do this. And then it's much more stronger stories like, oh, all of these different functions agree that this is the direction we should go. And here's a working prototype that shows that it can be done. And it's not going to take us 2 years to get there. Okay, here's small funding for you guys. Show us what you guys can do. You give results, and then you get more funding. That's how it goes.
So so for you along that journey, it was like, how do I become an internal ambassador where I can try to solve core customer problems? How do I find internal stakeholders that are going to be able to contribute and see my vision? And then how can I promote value by delivering a solution or an expectation or a customer problem, and then truly allow that to kind of evolve into something bigger and greater than you individually?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously, like I said, like I'm skipping a lot of the details. Like obviously, like in a large organizations, when you have these different verticals and you're trying to build something horizontal across the board, when you build something horizontal across the board, many people will see you as a threat. oh, actually, we want to do the same thing too now. Like we also want to build this platform. And then you have like 3 other organizations, like we're going to be the platform. You guys you're not the platform, we're the platform. And then you end up with the politics again in terms of like who's going to be the platform. And you get so sucked into the discussing like who's going to own this. In those scenarios, it's like, okay, let me just execute instead. So instead of like discussing how it should be built and done, let me just execute it and show it. Like, here it is. Like, are we going to discuss who's going to own this or build it? Or like, it's already there. So like, let's just do it. So sometimes you need to like brute force things as well. And obviously, depending on how hungry you are, it might be hard to brute force things because it might be that like I said, you're burning the candle from both ends. But I think big advice that I could give to any listener is like, it's not about working hard 24/7 and all the time burning candle from both ends. You're gonna burn out. You're not gonna get anywhere. It's identifying and understanding when to run, because there's gonna be periods in the career when you need to run in order to capitalize on an opportunity, and those opportunities don't present themselves every day. I mean, sometimes you can make the opportunities, but it's also a matter of circumstance. So when you identify that there's an opportunity, then you need to be prepared to run and make the most out of it. Otherwise, somebody else is going to take it away from you.
Yeah, and so I'm curious because as people get promoted into these leadership roles, whether you're a high level staff principal or architect, depending on the organization and the title that they give you. So being like a really, really high level individual contributor and or even just a VP of engineering,
Mhm.
you know, I have to imagine that there are challenges and moments of pride where you ran into a significant obstacle that you faced throughout your growth journey. So I'm just curious about, is there like a specific obstacle that you ran into that you believe was like a really big pivotal moment that allowed you to truly become who you are today from a leadership perspective?
I mean, there's been obstacles that have maybe slowed me down in my growth, and these are still growth areas for me. I think the 2 big ones are like these, like personal things. Like the first one was the ability to let go of control. So my early stages, my solution to solving problems, well, I'll just increase my effort and I will solve this problem. But then when the problems become sufficiently large, you need other people, and you need to trust these other people to be able to also execute at a high level. And then you can't micromanage people because they will lose sense of ownership and accountability, and it's another very motivating working place to execute in. And I know that myself. At the same time, I would sometimes haunt people and like kind of chase people and stuff, which was just because I wanted to make sure we met a certain date and so forth. So like just trusting people and letting go of control, delegating your work, and that's actually also like delegating the fun work away from yourself and taking on the, like, excuse my language, shit shoveling basically. So like I'll take on the work that is not so nice, so that these other people can take on the nicer work, and they will know that I took on the whatever not so fun work, so that they respect you more. Like, oh, this guy is willing to actually like take one for the team instead of just like hogging all the fun stuff for themselves.
Tribute the fun work to the team.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then obviously contribute, like attributing the work that other people did to the other people, so make sure that they get properly rewarded and recognized. They're more likely to follow you. Those are basic things. I think the second thing I'm still working on today, and it's a growth area of mine, is like active listening. I have relatively high emotional intelligence, I guess, but like I get very excited sometimes in meetings, and then I will realize after the meeting that I spoke for 45 minutes and nobody else said a word, and then I'm like, crap. So now I'm trying to be more mindful of like kind of surveying the room. I'm like, hey, like Shane, how do you feel about X and Y? Well, how should we approach this and so forth? And sometimes this is the weird political maneuvers. It's like sometimes you go into a meeting room and you know exactly, you shouldn't, but sometimes you know exactly what is the outcome that you want from the meeting. But how do you get to that outcome without saying what the outcome should be? And how do you get there by just asking questions from around the room?
Yeah, I've also been working on that one a lot, where I've classified that as like listening to understand versus listening to respond. Because
Yes.
every time I walk into a meeting where it's like, I know where I want to go with this, and I know what I'm trying to persuade the team to do. But if you can listen to understand, you can start to guide and get people to form ideas and to be able to build decisions together collaboratively to where you're creating cross-functional buy-in versus listening to respond. And then everybody's like, yeah, you had an agenda here.
Yeah.
We now know the agenda based off of this 45-minute dissertation. Thank you for the the TED Talk.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's been wonderful, like, because like I got promoted so early on, so being like, let's call it the snake bit, so like being involved in the politics and seeing kind of how your manager's manager and people speak differently to you in a direct one-to-one setting versus in a public setting with other organizations. So they might be more willing to kind of, they might like privately tell you like, this is what I want to happen, but in a public meeting they might say, well, Jon, I'm not sure exactly about your idea. Maybe we need to consider this and this person's perspective on this, even though internally they like already align that your thing is the right thing, but they will do the move of like, I want to make sure that this is a balanced discussion. And so and then you kind of like need to keep these. Oh, that's
You're like, got it. We got this chess game going on, and we're playing politics, even though we know what we're doing. But it's like, how do we get cohesive buy-in to where it's like, if there is conflict around a particular topic, or if there is conflict, it's positive conflict. And I do think that giving people the space for objections, if you will, is very powerful as well, and it might edge out some of the rough edges that your original idea might have, where it's like, how can we smooth that stuff out? So I guess one thing I'd want to ask too is just like, throughout your career, have you had anybody that stands out to you as like a role model? Like, part of me feels like there's a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, and you have that background of having this chip on your shoulder, and maybe that's a constant driver, and there's this role model sitting on your shoulder right here that's constantly talking to you, aka your chip on your shoulder. But like, has there been like a role model that's truly like inspired you and influenced you and has allowed you to have kind of a growth perspective that you have? Because again, a lot of promotions, you've been able to get promoted, so there's something there. So I'm trying to understand, like, was there a role model for you?
Role model is a hard one. I don't think a role model, but a lot of mentors for sure. But the mentors were usually management tracks, so they could give me a lot of good advice, but at the same time, not all of them had gone through the kind of the IC track, so it was hard to get that advice. There was one manager though, like Jeff Collins. He was working as the SVP of Engineering and General Manager for UGS, and he had like an architect background. He had also grown fast within the company, and he had made the switch from like IC into management into then general management. And I thought that's a path that I was kind of hoping to take as well. So I got a lot of good feedback from them, specifically on kind of different leadership styles, and then also like ways to approach people and like how to pace things, because I'm a very impatient person sometimes too. It's like sometimes like it's like you need to let things play out, and sometimes it's understanding like instead of trying to convince somebody to do something, sometimes it's okay to do concessions and let somebody be right at something so you can be right about the other thing that matters more. So I got a lot of good advice from him for sure. And that reminds me, I need to reach out to the guy, because I was supposed to set up like after I left Unity, like was supposed to set up like one-on-one set with him.
Yeah. Well, so I guess, I want to go back to, when we imagine, because I want to dive into Layer AI here in a second, but continued learning, continued education is a constant topic across everyone in a leadership role that I've spoken to over the years. And I know that it's something important to me. We just rolled out a new book for our team to read called Dare to Lead, which is one we're getting ready to do kind of like a book study group with in my organization, because we're constantly trying to get people to grow and to learn. But for you, it's just like, what is your opinion on continuous learning? And then what are things that you do to implement continuous learning for yourself?
I mean, like I have very big on self development in general. Like there's the non-work stuff. I'll touch on that very briefly, and then there's the work stuff. But the non-work stuff is very important as well, because how you feel outside of your work impacts your work. But I'll focus on the work ones first. So like I have like an hour block every day for quote unquote learning. It could be me doing Coursera, but often what happens is like, especially now that I joined a new company, is like an AI is like, I'm in meetings, I hear terminology and words, I have zero clue what these things mean. Instead of taking the meeting time to like ask questions, I'll just write all of these different words and terms down on a Word doc. So I'll build up a queue of things and concepts to learn. And then during that 1 hour, I'll just take things from the top and then like go over it, find new words and keywords and terminology to learn. So I'll keep kind of expanding my, I don't know, let's say call it like domain area lingo in that sense. And then what else? Obviously, important things to actually help improve is just to very candidly ask for feedback from people. And when you ask for feedback, not just, hey, how do you think I've been doing? But like, especially for me, for example, like I know I'm trying to work on active listening. I was like, hey, how did I do in terms of serving the room in the previous meeting? Hey, if you're more specific about the feedback that you're looking for, you're more likely to get it than if you just ask somebody to like, how am I doing? People will just say, great, you're doing great. So, and it's not going to be that helpful.
Especially for people that don't like giving feedback, or they don't like conflict. Like if you just say, how am I doing? And you leave it open to interpretation for good rather than something specific, it doesn't allow you to grow. So it's like, for the sake, like, I think field positioning and setting the stage on how to receive feedback is critically important. Where it's like, hey, like I'm actively working on this. Like, if you don't mind me asking, how do you think I did? And how do you think I could have improved? So it's always like the field positioning of like asking for feedback in a constructive manner versus going, can we just Julius Caesar this up and down? Like, am I dead or am I alive? Like, which one are we? Like, that doesn't work for feedback.
Yeah, that's very true. So feedback, having some routines, like some of the things like I said, I do outside of work is like, right now, like I especially this year, like I went through a breakup last November and stuff, and then I went through my like, okay, I need to like set up routines, work through these things, and like work hard on myself, and yada yada yada. So what did I do? Like doing Duolingo daily, doing this vocal training thing for like speaking voice and stuff on a daily basis, doing 30 minutes of meditation every day, gym 6 times a week for 1.5 hours. I still play tennis a couple times a week. I'm doing my 1 hour of like every day of domain area learning. It could be Coursera, it could be that stuff. And then what else? And then I have like vitamin and supplementation and this type of stuff just to keep my health up. So there's a lot of routines that I go on a daily basis just to like make sure that I can operate at my best level. And that's very, very important as well.
I do think a lot of people overlook how much personal development outside of work actually can help you inside of work. I know that 2 weeks ago, I decided to join every Tuesday. I'm going to Nashville Palace here in Nashville and learning line dancing. So first of all, I'm horrible at it. I'm like terrible, but when I first started, I was horrible. Yesterday, I crushed it. I did so good. I like smashed it, and I was putting in flair moves, and it was great. But when I first started, I was like horrible. And then throughout those last couple of weeks, as I've been going, at the beginning, it was a lot of frustration. Now that I have these dances that I know fairly well, I'm able to like just have fun with it. And I've had so many weird little like aha moments about work while not thinking about work at all. Like for whatever reason, I struggled at learning like this square step dance move. It was like really hard for me. And then once I figured it out, for whatever reason, it kind of like unlocked this thing in my head where I was like, I was really struggling at work to get somebody to understand something. And somehow me learning how to do that square step allowed it like unlocked how to re-explain how to do something in my job to someone. And they were like, holy moly. And they had that same aha moment from me teaching them, from me learning this stupid little square dance and like this square step thing. And somehow that unlocked my brain to like introduce how to explain this concept I've been trying to teach for weeks that I could not get through their head. I was just like, I was ready to bash my head through a wall. And this little square step taught me how to teach one of my employees how to have a breakthrough, which was wild. And that was outside of work, doing personal stuff, personal time that somehow sparked up my brain.
Yeah, no, I think like taking that time away from work and doing other things can definitely help you keep perspective on the work you're trying to do as well. And and then you can obviously learn skills outside of work that can help with work. And obviously like especially going back to the promotions and stuff, I think a lot of those soft skills and other things will matter way more down the line. And as unfortunate as it is, the reality is also for engineers is human beings are very superficial. The way like this has nothing to do with how you carry yourself in code, and actually how you write your reviews and stuff actually matters as well. It's just, so you can be nice there too, but like how you carry yourself in meeting rooms and conversations. Are you dressed for the occasion? Do you look healthy? Like how is your posture? All of that stuff communicates something about yourself. Like if you're I don't know, fit in good shape and stuff, it tells you that, oh, this person is probably has what's the word? I can't come up with a word. This is
I just think of good habits, good
habits in general. Exactly, like resilience, is able to have like take care of their health and all this kind of stuff. And consistency obviously as well. So it requires a consistent effort and stuff. So it communicates something about the person. It's a universal thing, obviously, but people will still perceive you and like evaluate you based on how you carry yourself. And why it translates to work is as well is that like if you're trying to convince somebody of an idea, I'm sure like you'll sell your idea better if you look confident and sure about your idea versus like somebody who just woke up from a bed kind of thing.
Yep. So I want to kind of shift the direction a tiny bit,
Yes.
and I want to kind of dive into Layer.ai. Like, help me understand, what does Layer.ai do?
So Layer.ai is a generative AI. Well, let's say it's an artistry tool or platform for game artists specifically. The main features that today we have on the platform is we allow customers, which are mostly enterprise today, to train style consistent styles for generating assets. So if you're an artist and you have a certain type of character, for example, you can upload 15 to 20 images of that character into our platform, and then you can do text to image or image to image to generate more of that character in our platform. That's one aspect. The second thing is and then you can also draw a sketch, for example, and generate something based on that as well. So there's different reference types that you can use. We also have a canvas that allows you then take those generations and then modify them on this web tool. Kind of think of a Photoshop, but you can like crop the eyes and ask it to generate red eyes and so forth. And then you can ask it to generate those eyes in different styles and so forth. And the tool is mainly used today for conception, primarily because under the hood we use Stable Diffusion, and which is not ethically trained today. Something that we launched very recently is Bria, which is an ethically trained model where the artists have actually been compensated for their art. And at Layer, we are very, very hard pressing on making sure that we try to be as ethical as we can. And if we could avoid it, we would basically just leverage those ethical models instead.
So how does that work? So that's been a huge topic in the gaming community lately, right? I mean, we've all seen it where you go to ArtStation and they have like the giant cross out, "Don't use my stuff" for AI banners as one of their recent photos over the last year, as people have been starting to adopt Midjourney and other variants of Gen AI products to produce art. So I'm curious as to like, where do you believe to be that ethical boundary versus the non-ethical boundary of like how generative AI is being implemented into games?
So if the artists have been compensated for the training data, I think any output that the model spews out is ethical by its nature, because we use the people that produce the content very rewarded. Now, and I think those assets could be used in production as well directly if they work. Now, the more interesting aspect is something like Stable Diffusion with Midjourney uses, as well as like well, actually, no, they use something else. But anyway, something that like comes to mind is if you use some of these open source models that have been trained with data that is non-ethical, it's probably okay to use for conception, for coming up with ideas, but not to be released as is. Now you can get into that, and often when people generate things in our tool, like they take the almost finalized asset and throw it into Photoshop to do final touch-ups and stuff anyway. Now the question is like, when are those touch-ups just touch-ups, and when is it sufficiently big enough of a change where it's a new piece of work? Like if I generate 4 pixels, if I generate a quarter of an image with generative AI and then draw the rest, is it now my work, or is it still AI generated work and unethical? If it's 80%, what about then? What if it's 1 pixel generated with AI? What about then? So there's a question of like when a given work is AI generated and unethical. So there's probably like a gradient there in between when that happens. Obviously today how the artists mostly work is like, if I'm building something, I'll go to, I don't know, Pinterest or Google and search for some images for some inspiration. I'll mash those images together in some new idea. which in some ways is what Stable Diffusion does, but obviously like it's human doing the processing and the work themselves.
Yep.
So in any case, I assume there's going to be legislation that's going to be passed in relation to this. That's going to be a forcing function to make sure that artists actually do get rewarded, and I think they should get rewarded. But as long as that legislation doesn't exist, I think it's very hard to get big guys to basically go and like compensate people accordingly.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting where we're starting to see studios, especially smaller studios, adopt, generative AI a lot faster. They're a lot earlier adopters than some of the larger organizations. But again, there is some philosophical like debates around why somebody should or should not use generative AI and how like artists are being impacted. The way that I've looked at it, and this is the conversations I've had over the last couple of months about this particular topic, which is like if you can rapidly iterate new concepts faster, it actually allows for you to have a delivery cycle more effectively and more efficiently, where it's just like you can leverage a tool that can give you where you're like, I have this thing in my head and I'm really trying to spit out 100 different versions, and we're trying to figure out 100 different versions faster. It's like it reduces the overall timeline to ship product, to ship features, to ship games. And ultimately, that's one of the biggest issues that we have in the gaming industry today, which is so many funded projects just aren't going to market. So it's like, how can we start reducing the friction to get things to market faster and more efficiently? And I think that's where generative AI starts to play an upper hand, which is like, help with the ideation phase, help with that. Like at the end of the day, you're the artist, you're going to be the architect that hits the final stamp of approval on what goes into the game. But like, if you can help get what's in your head out faster, I still look at it as like, it's like the architect that is truly standing and going, yeah, let's make that building.
No, 100%. And I think like going beyond ethical considerations, I guess it's also an ethical consideration. A lot of artists have had the fear of, oh, what happens to my job? Am I going to get replaced? And like, it's not just artists. Obviously, like as an engineer, it's like GitHub Copilot, and obviously it's going to be better and stronger LLMs that are going to produce code. Is like, oh, my job is going to be like removed. Like, I don't think the jobs are going to be ruined. I think just the delivery cycle is going to be reduced. And kind of like you said earlier, is like with games, especially, it's like beyond shortening the release cycle for initial release, games today are more live operation products than just release once and forget. So often you need to produce new content. So there's a Halloween campaign and you want to have a Halloween theme or Christmas theme or different types of themes, right? And then you need to create new assets for that specific theme, right? So how do you do that very fast with AI? That's going to be very convenient. Another thing that we heard from one of the customers that we had was that like sometimes the lack of amount of content is actually a limiting factor in like revenue optimization. So you have a game, especially in the Asian markets, and now this is another question: is like if business versus people. It's like there's mobile games out there that I can't give you a game example, but like there's mobile game out there that you have monetization, right? So you can buy experience boosts and all this type of stuff, right? And then in Asian markets, some players buy all the different boosts and stuff, and they blast through the content very fast, right? And then they run out of gameplay and they go away because there's no more gameplay. Now, obviously, like
constant conversation around that, right? It's like it's constant. Like, how do we iterate faster? Because we're in a market where there are a lot of things in society that are giving people instant gratification. Where it's like you've got Uber, you've got Netflix, you've got all these things where it's just like it's on demand and it's in my time and it's all the time. And it's like if you're not feeding that cycle of instant gratification, you're failing the end user because they're expecting things to be faster and faster more than ever.
Yes, and then in some ways, like I said, that's also ethical consideration. It's like, well, if I can give them more gameplay, they can spend more money. Now the question is like, is it good that they're spending more money? Like, if they have the money for it, by all means, then that just means that you as a business will make more money because you have more content for these people to actually consume. But some people could also say that's like, oh, they stay addicted longer, like shooting up IAP and stuff. But like, but I think it's more of like, if you think of it from a business perspective, it's like the longer you can keep your people in the game and keep the retention higher, the better.
And I think that's a big like even that's a bigger conversation where it's like, is it content being delivered that is what's driving additional revenue, or is it playtime and showing up every day? Because I know like in China, for example, they had that ban where it's like you can't give players rewards for spending certain amount of time every day consistently over time. Like they were like, we got to ban this because it's causing a form of addiction.
Yes.
And so it's like more content or rewarded slower content, which is like rewarded over a period of time. I don't know. Those are interesting ethical debates, but it's like I think there I know China specifically is trying to solve for that problem, which is like rather than slowly shipping features and making people kind of like that hamster wheel psychology.
If you throttle the game, let's say you can only buy one item a day, then you're throttling your own revenue, but increasing the lifetime of the game. If you say like you can buy whatever you want all the time and like all the boost, then the player can blast through the game very fast, and you got the revenue very fast. But if they had more gameplay, they could have probably spent more in your game. That's at that time, both time and money, obviously. So it's like finding the right balance. At the same time, obviously, sometimes I've played games in the past and I wish the game was longer because I enjoyed it so much. So
yeah. Which game?
Let's say take Resident. It doesn't work here for Gen AI, but I really like Resident Evil. But I feel like I just blast through the gameplay so fast. So.
Fair. So I guess for your team, because I want to give you some time to kind of sell Layer AI and what you guys are hiring for. What are you hiring for right now?
So right now, we're waiting to hire. So we are post-seed, going to raise Series A soon, and right after when we do that, it's probably going to be a lot of like full stack hiring, maybe some ML, but a lot of full stack engineers, because like we're not at the business of training like foundational models ourselves. We're more like the application layer between kind of the foundational models. We're like multimodal and multi-model agnostic, so that like we'll connect to these different models like Bria or Stable Diffusion or DALI or whatever, and then basically expose those through artistry tools to customers in the end. So most of the engineers that we're going to be hiring for are like full stack engineers eventually.
Okay.
Maybe some product as well. Yeah.
Okay. And when you interview people, right, what are going to be the biggest things that you're looking for an engineer that would fit with your team, with your culture, with your technology stack and interests?
I think for technical skills, I mean, we're like doing like Python because it's good for ML and so forth, and then JavaScript, TypeScript, common full stack languages that we leverage across the board, very important. We have the Canvas tool, so WebGL can be very important, but that's more for niche, usually for developers. So like not many people who worked on web have to deal with WebGL. Now, in terms of skills, like interpersonal skills, the most important thing for me that I look for in a person is initiative. So when I ask people like, can you give me an example of an idea that you draw and how you went about it? Like, who did you need to convince? How did you convince them? Why did you think it was a problem worth solving, and so forth? Because ultimately, like especially for a startup, the early hires are very important, and a single bad hire can make the company go belly up. So you want to have people that have a very high level of high sense of accountability, and want to deliver impact, can work autonomously, and think on their feet, and be like end-to-end product owners essentially, right? So that's why initiative is very important. Accountability is another one that is very important as well. So that if you say you're going to deliver X, you're going to deliver X. So if I need to start chasing people, then or other people need to chase other people, then
you're like, I'm out for those reasons.
It quickly erodes trust within the organization, and then if you can't trust other people to deliver, then you start getting the feeling of like, oh, why should I deliver this in time because this person is able to get away with it, and so forth.
And so kind of closing things out, how can people get a hold of you? What is the best way to communicate with you for interest in Layer AI or just general networking? How can somebody get in contact with you?
LinkedIn is the best. I do get a lot of spam, but I will read every email, but it will be just a very quick, like, is this just a copy paste thing or not? So like, I will read LinkedIn every single time somebody messages me. You can always email me at like Joona at Layer.ai. I do get some spam there too as well, but I always read everything. It's just a matter of like who's messaging and what the topic is and the content is, if depending on if I will like get back.
Okay.
I can contact with you. I don't remember how you contacted me, but like anymore. But in any case, I got back, so here we are.
And LinkedIn, email, one or the other.
One or the other, yeah.
At the end of the day, I think we're like multi-threaded. We're messaging in every which way possible. So, like Joona said, connect with them on LinkedIn, check out Layer.ai. From my understanding, if you want to try out the product, I think that there's a get started for free version. So test out Layer AI, get some gaming concepts and some art concepts going, and see if it adds value to your company, and produce some badass art. So I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today, and I hope if you liked today's comment below, ask questions, give us like a virtual high five, whatever you want to do. But again, really appreciate you taking time to speak with me today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Shane.
All right.